Welcome to Cravings Control for Fat Loss. I'm your host, Laura Cavallo, former sugar binger, overeater, and yo-yo dieter turned fat loss and cravings coach for hundreds of busy women. Here at Cravings Control for Fat Loss, I'll be sharing mindset, movement, and metabolism strategies for those who are ready to ditch the fat diet cycle and slim down without counting calories, tracking points, or giving up any of the foods they love. Get ready to embrace progress over perfection, grace over guilt, and bring curiosity and learning to the inevitable ups and downs of your life. Expect a decrease in your cravings while seeing and feeling an improvement in how you look, how you feel, and your overall quality of life. I am so excited you're here, boo. Let's get started. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with Rae Anne Mullins, who started her career in fitness in 1994 when she first started teaching step aerobics. After losing 65 pounds in a very realistic and safe way, Rae Anne made it her mission to help other women lose weight and get fit. In 2018, Rae Anne was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and has recently been working with women who have Hashimoto's and underactive thyroid. Rae Anne is a certified nutrition coach, a thyroid coach, a sleep and stress management coach, and still teaches fitness classes locally and online. Rae Anne grew up in Wyoming, but now she lives in North Carolina with her husband, Brian, and her two kids, Mackenzie and Zach. She likes to spend her time working on her wellness business, working out, hiking, and caring for her three pets, Benny, Bo, and Charlie. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey there, boo! I am so excited to announce that another round of the Cravings Code will open for enrollment this September. If you haven't heard, the Cravings Code is for women who struggle with overeating, constant cravings, and insatiable hunger, and are ready to get them under control while shifting their all-or-nothing thinking around diet, around exercise, and their health. What you can expect is up to a 70% decrease in your cravings, in your hunger, and your overeating, and prime yourself to naturally eat fewer calories and sustainably lose weight if that's one of your goals. The best part of all this, there's absolutely no eliminating your fun foods, there's going to be no fad dieting, and there are no gimmicks. As a result of the strategies and tools I'm going to teach you, you're going to see your guilt, your shame, and the stress around food slowly fade away. I guarantee it. If this sounds like something you need and are interested in, go below and add your name to the waitlist. By adding your name, there is absolutely no commitment to join, but you do get an option to enroll early at a majorly discounted rate. More details coming in August, and I'll see you there. Before diving into today's show, I want to announce the winner for the Raffle prize for those that left a review on the Cravings Control for Fat Loss podcast. I want to thank everyone that took the time out to leave a 1 or 2 sentence review and your 5-star rating to help get exposure for our podcast and support all of this free content that we put out. And so thank you again so much. And without further ado, I have 5 names in this little hat right now. So I'm going to, I can't see anything. I'm going to pull the winner of the $50 prize right now. And congratulations to Buckeye Lady 85. Thank you so much for your review. I'm actually going to read it. Buckeye Lady says, Laura's podcast is very helpful and worth your time. You will learn how to have a better relationship with food, practical info that gets you out of the restriction cycle. Thank you so much for your review, Buckeye Lady, and I will reach out to get you your $50 gift card. Thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of Cravings Control for Fat Loss. My name is Laura Cavallo. I'm your cravings coach, and today I am talking with a very special guest. Rae Anne Mullins is here. Hi, Rae Anne.
Hey, Laura. So happy to be here.
I'm very excited to have you on. Rae Anne specializes in Hashimoto's and helping women with their symptoms through lifestyle habits. And so I'm really excited to dive deeper into Hashimoto's and what it's all about, and then learning more about your journey and your challenges and your Hashi's story and kind of what you did to kind of get to where you are now and to help you. So let's just dive in. Why don't you first tell me, like, what is Hashimoto's and how do people know if they have Hashimoto's?
Awesome. Okay, so Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disorder where your immune system actually attacks your thyroid specifically as if it's some invader. So that's not good
Yeah.
because we need our thyroid for everything. It
Yeah.
manages our heart rate, our respiration, our sleep, our stress. I mean, it really does a lot. It's a part of the metabolism system. And so when your immune system thinks that your thyroid is, invading your body, it starts to attack it as if it's, an invader.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can cause a lot of symptoms. And the unfortunate thing about Hashimoto's is that a lot of the symptoms come on slowly and they can be explained, like you're tired. Well, we're tired because we're working, or we're tired because we're a parent, or we're tired, for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
Gut issues, brain fog, all kinds of things can start happening that can be easily explained off. And
Right.
so that's
Right.
kind of why people aren't sure that they even have it.
Yeah. And why does it happen? Like, why does your body start to attack your thyroid?
So it's funny, there's a couple of reasons, but number one is not everybody's going to have this happen. So that's good news. But a lot of people are already like have a genetic predisposition to it. So maybe their mother had it, or their father, or, an aunt or an uncle or somebody up line in their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though it's somewhat new, it's not new, but it's somewhat new and becoming more prevalent. People that have family members that have hypothyroidism, typically hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid, are going to be more likely to develop Hashimoto's, because it's now known that about 80 to 85% of people with hypothyroidism also have Hashimoto's.
Wow.
It's one of the most it's the one thing that can almost definitely lead you to hypothyroidism if you don't treat early enough.
Okay.
And so number one is you might have the genetics of having a thyroid issue, which Hashimoto's is a thyroid issue. But like I said, that doesn't mean you will get it. The second thing is high stress. So chronic stress is probably one of the most important things to understand, is that stress and trauma can create fear and inflammation in your body, which is going to turn, especially if you have the genetic predisposition, can turn to an autoimmune disease and attack the thyroid. Those are the two really, really big causes.
Okay.
But also just like poor gut health
Okay.
can be a part of it too.
So interesting.
Yeah, but usually gut health is oftentimes a result of chronic stress as well, and poor diet. Okay, so everything that you teach, like eating better, feeling better, thinking better, all of that is very important to help prevent Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
Thyroidism.
Last year I went to the doctor and they said that I had some markers for thyroid issues. Something like my TH something was off, and they said that I had one marker for Graves' disease and another marker was normal. And they were saying that Graves' disease is similar to Hashimoto's in that it's a thyroid issue.
Yes.
But it wasn't so much of a concern that I needed to start doing any treatment or anything like that. But something to monitor. And that was a period of like high stress, at least like for the previous couple years before that. I mean, a lot of us going through COVID and figuring out what that was all about. But
yeah,
is Graves' disease and Hashimoto's similar? Are you familiar with Graves at all?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Graves. It is also an autoimmune. So Graves' disease is more hyperthyroid, and it's actually more dangerous than Hashimoto's. Sorry to tell you that. But it's like, what can happen is when you get hyperthyroid, too much thyroid, that's actually more dangerous than a slower.
Interesting.
I think a lot of people think, oh, I'd rather have a fast thyroid or overactive because then I'll be skinny.
Yeah.
No, there's actually a lot of danger involved with a lot of toxicity can happen in your body. So, but here's the thing. A lot of people that have Graves' disease can also then, or oftentimes then, get Hashimoto's. So once you have any autoimmune disorder, no matter what it is, you're more likely to develop others. So especially if it's around the same organ, if you have Graves or Hashi, they can go back and forth. Yeah. And so that's the other thing to understand about Hashimoto's is Hashimoto's eventually leads, untreated, eventually leads to hypo or underactive thyroid. But there's a time period in there where your body can actually bounce back and forth between hyper and hypo. So too active and under.
Interesting.
And I can pinpoint a time when I'm pretty sure I was hyper thyroid. This is before I had any clue that Hashimoto's was even a thing. Like it wasn't even in my like world, you know?
Yeah.
And at the time, so I owned a fitness studio for almost 8 years, and I was teaching most of the classes. I was basically running myself to the ground. And there was a point at which people started saying to me, wow, you're getting really lean. And, you know, I loved that.
Yeah.
Just to be honest, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I was feeling super stressed. And so I think deep down, I knew it wasn't a good thing. Like it was like,
right.
You know, I was feeling really shaky, really, you know, just high anxiety. And I was feeling, well, I was kind of like getting leaner, but kind of that not healthy look.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, though, I wasn't being tested for anything. So then that flipped. All of a sudden, I was like gaining weight. And I'm like, why am I mean, I'm working out like crazy, right? And I was eating really what I considered to be healthy. I mean, I was also a nutrition coach. So I was following, you know, what I thought to be an appropriate amount of food and a good balance. But I was like probably overstressing overstressing, meaning I was running this business. It was really hard. I was a total control freak. Like I didn't want anyone's help. I didn't want anyone's opinion. It was like my baby and I was going to run it how I wanted it. And I was like, la, la, la. So meanwhile, I was like totally running mentally myself into the ground, but also because I was teaching like 15 to 20 classes a week.
Wow.
Participating in every single one because I felt like that's what you had to do. I was physically and mentally just so like bottoming out. And I was so good at faking it that I just I could push through. And so that's when I started noticing like around my middle, you know, I was like about, I don't know, 39. I wasn't even in my 40s yet. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I don't think I'm like in menopause age. You know, I was like, something's wrong with me. And I couldn't quite figure it out. I was exhausted, but I could explain it. I mean, of course I was exhausted, you know, but I was gaining weight. I was freezing cold all the time, freezing cold. And I was also starting to lose hair, not like clumps, like nobody else could tell, but in the shower, you know, when you wash your hair, we all like lose some hair when we wash our hair. But it was like I was taking like handfuls and this is gross, but I would stick it to the shower wall because, you know, you can't get it off here.
Yes.
And at the end of the shower, there'd be like a clump of hair. And I'd be like, wow, I must need to wash my hair more often. You know, like I was, that's weird. And so I never even thought about it. And then later I was starting to get really bad heartburn. Like everything was giving me heartburn, like just miserable heartburn. And so there's just all these things that were like coming up. And so I went to the doctor. I'm like, I'm exhausted. I have heartburn. I'm gaining weight. Like, what's wrong with me? So this happened probably 8 times that I went and got my thyroid tested.
No.
I mean, this is years. This is years like of like, what is wrong with me? Oh, your thyroid's fine. Because the only thing they tested, so this is really important for everybody, is that most doctors, and it's not because they're bad doctors or like, it's not like bashing doctors, but when you go to the doctor and they check your thyroid, they usually only check your TSH. So that may be what you were talking about.
Right.
And that is your thyroid stimulating hormone. And so the TSH is the main marker of thyroid because if your brain is noticing it's not getting enough thyroid hormone for energy, then your brain will signal to your thyroid to produce more TSH. So when your TSH is high, that means that you're not getting enough of the active hormone, which is T3. So there's a whole panel of thyroid hormones that need to be tested.
Yes. And they weren't testing them.
No, I mean years. No. And so my TSH still to this day with full-blown Hashimoto's is still in the normal range. It's never not been in the normal range. So had I never been an advocate of myself, I finally was like, it's time to just keep seeking help. Like I can't. So I had the heartburn. So my doctor sent me to a gastroenterologist. So I had an endoscopy done. And they were like, yeah, you have acid reflux, take some Pepsid or whatever
Right.
And so I did that. And then I was really bad brain fog. So I just couldn't like really get through a day, a conversation. I couldn't think of words, I mean,
Wow.
it was just really like, I literally felt like I was like in a fog. I would be in the middle of a class and forget how to count the reps or,
Oh,
like I was
wow.
having like struggling, and I would just make a joke of it and like, haha, like move on. So I actually went to a neurologist to find out if I had anything wrong with my brain. I mean, it literally was like this like circus of like doctors, and every single one would come back and I'd be fine. So that is when I finally went to an integrative, like functional
Mm-hmm.
doctor. And I was skeptical, to be honest, because you know it, there's such a controversy on like, should you go to a medical doctor versus the functional. So I went to a place that they are medical doctors, but they just practice a more holistic approach. And so I went, and I'm not kidding you, with the first appointment, well, actually, that's not true. It was the second, because I went the first, told my symptoms, they did my blood work.
Right.
The second appointment, she's like, yeah, you have Hashimoto's. Like, duh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, I remember being like, okay, how did you know that? And she's like,
Yeah.
well, you have every symptom, and your
Look at your
T4,
hormones.
T3,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not right. And there's two more things. So this is what maybe they test with you. There's two other tests. There's the TPO, which is your thyroid peroxidase.
Mm-hmm.
TPO is like the shortened version. TPO and thyroid globulin,
Okay.
TG. Those two are markers of like antibodies for any autoimmune, but specifically around the thyroid.
Okay.
So both of those were high
Wow.
for me. And so even though my thyroid hormones were just they weren't even really bad. Like they weren't optimal, they were like in the range, but not the best
Yes.
part of the range, the
Yeah.
low end of the range. But those two antibodies were high, showing that I had inflammation and autoimmune attacking my thyroid.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's important to understand, is that if you have all these symptoms and you keep being told that you're fine, and you're not fine, to keep pushing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not saying everybody has a thyroid issue or Hashimoto's, but I do talk to a lot of people. I'm like, you literally have every symptom that we've been talking about. It's why not just go ask your doctor for the test? And if you can't
Yes.
find a doctor that will do it, keep looking for a doctor that will do it.
Right. And how long before you got those answers? Like how long from like the first doctor when, you started gaining the weight and being like, something's going on, to that positive Hashimoto's test?
I think it was about 5 years.
Wow.
So in 5 years, the damage that continued,
Yeah.
is like, here's the thing about it, is during that 5 years, I was still fortunately a relatively healthy person. So I already had taken out processed foods, and I already was eating pretty healthy. At the time, I didn't even drink alcohol. I do now, but it was like, I really had a healthy lifestyle. But what I didn't understand is that my healthy lifestyle still wasn't an optimal lifestyle for somebody with
For
Hashimoto's.
Hashimoto's.
And so some of those things are, food intolerances. So I'm not allergic, but I have a food intolerance. So there's a difference between allergy versus intolerance. I'm not allergic to gluten, but I have a very, very high intolerance, I guess. Not tolerance, but an intolerance to
Right.
gluten and dairy, soy and eggs. Those are like my main foods that really, truly are not good for me to have. And so I was eating that like crazy. I mean, yeah, I was eating balanced diet. I was eating like, everything was balanced. I ate my protein. I had lots of vegetables, but I was having things like bread, like even healthy bread. I was
Yeah.
eating
Yeah.
like whole grain bread.
Having eggs and
Oh, eggs are
yeah.
crazy, because what a great protein source, right? So I mean, whey protein shakes, cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is the big thing right now.
Yeah.
Which I'm jealous, because I would love to try some of those recipes,
Right. Right.
but
Yeah.
but I'm not going to. So there was a lot of things that, I was eating that previous years I had lost 65 pounds doing. So that's kind of the other side of the story is in 2005, after I had my second child, I was overweight quite a bit. And I decided just one day, I was like, I got to quit this dieting. I was dieting, which was why I couldn't lose weight. And what I mean by dieting is I was, trying every fad diet I could, and I was not eating enough and trying to exercise a lot. And it wasn't getting anywhere because I would make it 3 or 4 days and then I would binge eat.
Right, right.
Like the story we know that this happens with so many people. And so finally, I just decided I was just going to fuel my body. And I started just eating a protein, a carb, and a fat with every single meal. And I just did it. And all of a sudden, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, my pants feel better. And then, and next thing I know, I'm like in the roll, I'm going. And 65 pounds down. And at the time, I was teaching fitness classes, which was awesome because the people in my classes were watching me change. And it was such a great thing for me. At the time, I didn't realize. I was a little embarrassed, actually. At the time, I was like, why would people come to my classes? I'm overweight. I kind of had a negative thought about it, but I also knew I could do it. So I kept going. And I found out after the fact that people were so inspired by it that actually that's how I started getting my first like nutrition and fitness clients, because, outside of teaching classes, because they saw that I did it, that I lived it. And
right.
So that was how I kind of got into like making fitness and nutrition like my career. But anyway, all of those habits that I was doing and had such great success on. So obviously I didn't have Hashimoto's at the time, but I took that drive or whatever to just stay consistent with my food and my exercise. And that's when I opened the studio. So here's kind of where the window change.
Yeah.
the things start to unfold because my stress levels went from here to like way up here.
Right.
And I think that definitely was like the turning point as far as my health was concerned. And even though I looked as if I was living this great healthy lifestyle, somewhere underneath, my body was starting to break down. And instead of listening to that, I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing because I had a mission.
Right.
It was like, and by the way, I was terrified of regaining the weight because how embarrassing would that be, And so I think I had the pressure of not only like running my business and doing all the exercise, but now I've layered on top of like, oh my gosh, I can never, ever, ever gain weight back because people will think I'm a fraud, or I'm not good enough, or I couldn't really, I had this whole like fear of gaining the weight back. And so all of that just piled on top. And so clearly now knowing I definitely had a genetic predisposition. My mother had a thyroid condition, never knew about it.
Okay.
And so when I told my mom, when I finally did find out about Hashimoto's, that, I was like, I have Hashimoto's. She's like, so just take a pill.
Right.
And I was like, but
yeah,
that's not me. And so I was like, she was like, I've had a thyroid problem for 30 years. And I'm like, well, thanks for the info now.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Good to know. 30 years later.
Yeah. And so, anyway, all of, I'm just saying like, there's definitely for me, the genetic already there, the high stress, not only physical, but mental. So those were definitely, I think, what then led me to the actual disease. And then I continued to eat the things that I had developed an intolerance to, but of course I didn't know that.
Right.
And so it was at that second doctor's appointment where I found out Hashimoto's that I was like, okay, what do we do? Cause I'm a doer. Like, I'm like, what's the next step?
Yep.
Let's go. And she was like, well, the first step is we got to remove food. We got to heal your gut. So now when I work with people, the very first step is like, okay, let's check out your diet. Let's like, how is your gut health? And so anyway, we did a food intolerance blood test. And so not everybody has to do that. Like, you don't have to go get a blood test, but I was like, so determined. I had, 5 years of trying to figure this out. I was like, let's do it. So I got the test. It was like 240 foods were tested.
Wow.
And it came back. I had quite a mess. It was like 35 different foods. And most of it was foods that I was eating a lot of. And so To be honest with you, it was very overwhelming and scary, and I didn't know what to eat. And I went into a couple weeks of feeling sorry for myself and being mad at the world and being a victim. And I had to like get out of that before I could really, start working on this. And so part of why I do what I do is I don't want anyone to feel like I did.
Yeah.
Because it was scary. And even though I have an awesome doctor, she wasn't there to hold my hand. I mean, she told me what I needed to do, but there was no like guidance. There was no
Right.
like, I'm like, how do I go gluten free? Like, how do I don't even know what that means. Like
Yeah, totally. So thanks for sharing your story. And
yes.
I can't imagine going 5 years with all these unanswered questions and trying to understand what's going on with your body. And then, I mean, what a relief to get at least some answers. And then, okay,
Yeah.
like after that initial period of like shock, right?
Yeah.
Of now being able to take action. So you talked about doing like a food intolerance test. You talked about possibly eliminating some foods that could be triggering. So say someone comes to you and says, I think I have Hashimoto's. What are the steps that you take them through to help figure out if they have Hashimoto's? And then what services do you provide to people that do have Hashimoto's to help them with their symptoms?
Great question. The very first thing, if somebody comes to me and says, wow, I have a lot of the symptoms you have. I think this is me. Well, since I'm not a doctor, I can't really do anything for them at that point except encourage them to go and get a diagnosis. So the very first step is just go and get your thyroid tested, a whole panel. And those two other tests, the TPO and the TG tests, have to be tested to find out if you have actual Hashimoto's. But in the meantime, if they're willing to, we can start already working on the things that I know if they already feel a certain way, doing the lifestyle actions and habits that I teach are going to help them no matter what. So we can get them at least started. And so probably the first thing we talk about is eliminating gluten. And if the person is not ready and willing to do that, then we move to the second phase. So I have a couple phases we go through. We go through removing triggers.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell you this first.
Yeah.
So removing triggers, and the triggers are going to be food intolerances, high stress situations, toxins. So, maybe a toxin could be like cosmetics. It could be reusing a plastic bottle too many times. It could be,
wow,
things like cosmetic, like Botox and things like that. And not everybody has a problem with that. But so we look at their lifestyle, their current lifestyle, and see what is probably the most glaring, obvious, toxic thing in their life. And that could be a relationship. It could be a job. It could be whatever. So we do a full analysis of like what's going on in your life right now and try to find those obvious things. So remove the triggers. Once the triggers are removed, by the way, this could be months.
Right. Yeah.
You can't, it's not overnight. I always would say Hashimoto's healing is a marathon, not a sprint. Because it's like, you got to be digging in with some patience.
Right. Right. Especially if it's a toxic job or relationship, and, even people managing stress, that takes time to figure out how to do that and figure out that you're stressed and prioritize that.
Yeah. If your husband's toxic, it's not like you're going to go and I'm just joking kind of, but really that's actually a thing. It's not like you can just go what do you do overnight, change it?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Or your job, like you said. So that takes some time. So we try to come up with the most obvious, easy, cherry picking, what can we get rid of first? And then the next thing is replenishing your body with nutrients. So not just with what you're eating, but supplements, so a lot of people with Hashimoto specifically have vitamin D deficiency, which is really common among a lot of people. So again, if we don't have the diagnoses yet, it's still not going to hurt to find out if you need some vitamin D, so vitamin D, zinc, selenium is a great supplement for your thyroid, and B vitamins and things like that. So there's ways to, just supplement some of the deficiencies that we have. And just by taking out maybe some foods and adding in some supplements right there, you're already going to gain some energy and feel a little bit better. So sometimes that's where we the main starting points.
Okay.
And then, then just reviving your thyroid would be, again, supplements, finding the right movement patterns for you. So a lot of people tend to over exercise, which you probably see that a lot too. People trying to outwork their diet and so we talk about, what is the best movement for this person, what, strength training, or maybe it's just walking. And some people I actually suggest they don't exercise at all other than just daily movement, which sounds so weird, especially coming from a, fitness background. So there's these different levels, and where people need to go just depends on the person. So right now, what I'm offering is just one-on-one coaching.
Okay.
And so I'm actually working on a program.
Oh, awesome.
That I can get more people in, and I'm really excited about it, but it's just, I'm not quite ready to do a whole program. I feel, I'm still working more one-on-one with people so I can customize it really. And then, as I'm working with more and more people, I'm seeing the main, complaints and and I already basically have this program written, but I feel like right now my best place is just helping people individually until I'm really ready.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you talked about eliminating triggers as step one. I know personally for you, that was things like soy, gluten, dairy, eggs. Are those the main triggers for most people? And is that really done through a blood test? Or can someone say, all right, I'm going to see if eggs trigger me today and I'm going to have eggs. And then how do they track that if they're doing it alone, or does it come through? So my question is twofold. Are there main foods that you take out for most people? And then how do people track what is triggering for them via nutrition?
I love this. So this is actually one of my favorite things to do, is to work with people on eliminating their food intolerances. So number one, no, you don't have to get a blood test. I think a lot of people don't like to do it because it's really expensive. Insurance isn't going to cover it. And I mean, nobody wants to get their blood drawn all the time. So yeah, you're right. What I recommend is, if you're suspecting Hashimoto's specifically, gluten is probably the number one most important thing to remove. It is known that, gluten is a protein in wheat that actually attacks the thyroid when you have the autoimmune. Yeah.
Wow.
And here's the crazy thing is, you may not even notice that you're having symptoms until you remove it.
Right.
It's so gluten, eggs, dairy is a big one. So dairy and gluten are very similar in the way they go, are processed through your body. So dairy, for many people, if you have gluten, you're most likely going to have a dairy issue too. And that's very blanket statement. Not everybody does, but
yeah.
And then, so what did I say? Soy is another big one. So those are the four main culprits. But like when I first got tested, just side note, I had an intolerance to chicken, mushrooms, peppers, blueberries, all nuts.
Oh shit. Wow.
Yeah. It was horrible, actually.
Wow.
So I went from we eat a lot of Mexican food at our house, so I couldn't eat peppers anymore. Oh, and onions. I mean, so what had happened is my gut health had just gotten so poor that my body was rejecting everything.
Yes.
So I can eat most of that stuff now.
Nice.
But yeah, so when you eliminate a food, I really leave it up to the person, because oftentimes if you remove everything, it's going to take longer to find out which thing is the culprit. So if somebody's really, really, really hesitant to do it, I'll be like, you know what, let's just start with gluten or dairy. I'll give them the choice, like gluten or dairy, which one you want to do. And then we take it out for 3 weeks. And then during that time, we ahead of time have kind of an idea of what the symptoms are. Like maybe they're having heartburn or brain fog, or just can't lose weight, or they have achy joints. There's things that are already bothering you, like maybe skin condition, acne or rashes or whatever. So we already kind of have an idea of what their problem is. And then we take it out 3 weeks. And through that, I help them, like, well, what can you eat? Because that was the thing that drove me crazy, is like, what do I eat? So I help them with that. But then after 3 weeks, you add the food back one day. Like you eat one time an egg, or let's say a piece of bread. Like maybe then I always recommend eating something that you really, really miss, so that, because otherwise if you feel good without it, like just don't ever add it back. But so like have a piece of toast or whatever, and then you wait 2 to 4 days. I actually like people to wait 4 days, because for me, I can eat gluten and I'm like, oh, see, I'm fine. And then 4 days later, my knee hurts, or I have heartburn, or like my wrists get so bad that I can't even do a push up or hold plank because my joints, that's where I feel it the most.
Yeah.
So after 4 days, if nothing happens, then you try it again. And if nothing happens again after 4 days, then you can pretty much safely assume that wasn't the food. And then we go to the
Wow.
next food.
Wow.
Or you can take out all the main things and then just add one food at a time back. So no matter what, it's a process. It's like you're going to commit to a couple months, of trial.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Here's what I always tell people, like when we focus on what we can eat and instead of what we can't eat, it's really easy because, for example, gluten, people are so scared to take out gluten. They're like, everything has gluten. I can never do it.
Yeah.
Everything I love has gluten. And I'm like, well, actually, there's a ton of food that's just naturally gluten-free, like potatoes, oats, rice, beans. I mean, because usually you think carbs when it comes to like gluten. And it's only as hard as you make it. You know what I mean? If you really want to feel better, then you're going to be willing to like spend a little time. And so I help them come up with a list of foods that are like go to, like green foods,
Yeah. So what do you eat for breakfast since you don't eat eggs?
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And so I'd say it's so hard. It's not. I just love eggs. So
of course.
I do eat a lot of protein powder. And so I have to be careful with that too, because again, it's not whole food. So you have to like with Hashimoto's, like if I'm starting to feel flared up, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take out any like processed foods. And technically, but I do love oats. This is my favorite breakfast. Rolled oats, scoop of protein powder, mix it up. Coconut milk, because I don't do dairy, so I use coconut milk. And I don't really do a lot of nuts. I mean, almonds, because almonds kind of bother me too. So I do coconut milk instead of almond milk. Mix it up. I put a ton of berries on top and like some chia seed. Oh my gosh. And eat it cold. So it's just like kind of like overnight oats, but not.
Eat it cold.
Yeah,
okay.
It's so good. Not warm. It is amazing. It's really good with walnuts on it. But again, like I have to
walnuts.
just kind of watch. Yeah. Like really good.
Yeah.
Or protein shakes.
Yep.
Or my good trusty go-to is a quesadilla, but it's not really a quesadilla because there's no cheese. Adilla? I don't know. So I do I always have ground beef taco meat or turkey meat, like made into taco meat. It's always in my fridge for a quick protein. And I'll take a gluten-free tortilla, which isn't super duper duper healthy to eat a gluten-free tortilla, but it's a carb. It works. I'll put some taco meat on it and grill it like a quesadilla and put some salsa. So good.
There you go. Yeah, you have to get creative when you are limited, on the types of foods that you can eat or I have a client right now, she's really picky and we're trying to come up with breakfast ideas. And I'm like, you might have to have like a chicken taco in the morning, right? You might have to have leftovers if that's appealing to you, if you don't want to keep having eggs and things like that. So
yes,
when I go to Italy, I'm Italian. Like my family's like, you guys eat eggs for breakfast? Like they don't eat eggs for breakfast there. They have like a brioche or like a croissant and like a coffee. Like it's very on the go for them. But them eggs in the morning, they're like, that's so weird. Like we'll do like a frittata or something like that. Like they'll do that for lunch or for dinner.
Isn't that funny?
So it's interesting.
That is interesting. But I do think you're right. I think, and I don't know about you, but I get sick of sweet. Like I used to be such a sweet. Oh, I do love sweets, but like for breakfast, I get tired of like sweet things. So protein shakes are usually sweet with the fruit, or like the oats are usually sweet. So I love using or even like a taco bowl. I do everything taco. It's so easy to go gluten free with Mexican food.
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah.
And there's lots of gluten free options now. I find that like when I lived in LA, there was a lot more because they're a little bit more, I guess, progressive on the health and holistic diet nutrition front.
Yeah.
But you can go to your regular supermarket, go to like the healthy section. They call it like health conscious section or whatever. And you can find gluten-free things. There's dairy alternatives now. There's a lot of different options for people.
Yeah. And I do want to say this last thing about gluten, about that comment. There's so many really good new like breads and tortillas and cookies and pretzels. But one thing I like to warn people is that oftentimes switching to the gluten-free option, when you actually look at the nutritional breakdown of it, it's usually not that good.
It's not great.
It's really not great, but they're good in a pinch. Like there's a brand, Char, Schar, has an amazing deli, like sourdough deli bread. And I love it. And it's not terrible for you, but I try to limit like the tortillas and I call it the fake gluten. I try to limit that because that also if you have too many processed foods, can create an inflammation response. So although I think it's awesome, it's just really important to remember that you can also make your own, like making oat flour is a great way to like make breads and cookies and
Wow.
muffins. So I do a lot of that too.
That's true.
Just throwing that out there because I think it's important.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. So if people have flares during their Hashi process of adjusting lifestyle and things like that, are those similar symptoms to like before you started treatment? Like, is it brain fog? Is it tiredness, fatigue? Like, what's a flare look like for someone?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So I'm actually in a flare currently. I went on vacation and had kind of a situation where there wasn't a lot of options. And I thought, well, I've been so good for so long. Good. Like I've been in remission for so long. I'm just going to go ahead and not worry about it. And I got home and the first, like for me, heartburn was like incredible. I haven't had heartburn in a couple of years. And I was like, uh-oh. And then joint pain and brain fog. And I don't know if you can tell, like in looking through here, but one thing I started to say earlier is I start losing my eyebrows. Like my eyebrow hair starts to fall out. So, that it's very frustrating because you can be going along just great and it can be some small little thing that can put you into a flare up. And that's when I have to remember that it's different than before. Like I have to like remember that my body's actually being attacked right now. And so I need to treat it better and not punish it by doing more. So also weight gain is a big part of it. When you get inflamed, you gain weight. So it's not fat a lot of the times, it's just inflammation in your body. But when you jump on the scale and see a 6 to 8, to 10 pound gain, it can be really frustrating. Yeah. And so like, that's when I have to remind myself, okay, wait, you almost have to do the opposite of what you think of, it's like you have to slow down and fuel your body, like fuel and slow down, rest, recover, spend more time sleeping. And so, but it is frustrating. But that's kind of back to my statement of it's a marathon, it's a sprint, because once you have it, and it's like, and that's okay as long as you keep it, under control.
Right.
Yeah.
So do doctors prescribe medication for Hashimoto's?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So the only medication is thyroid medication. And so there are different stages of Hashimoto's. And when you get to so there's 0 stage is when your predisposition to it genetically, you don't know it, you don't have it, you're good. The next phase is when your immune system's actually starting to filtrate your thyroid. So it's getting in the cells of your thyroid, starting to attack your thyroid. That's when you get like mild symptoms. The next stage is when it's attacked so much that you've become hypothyroid. So you actually now have a thyroid condition where you need medication. Because when you don't have enough thyroid or your thyroid's underactive, then you need to supplement with more thyroid medication. So what happens there is you obviously have to go get a blood test and see what you need. And a lot of times it's testing, like trying a little bit, maybe you need more, maybe you need, it's kind of a process. But there really is no other medication. I'm actually though on a medication called naltrexone. And naltrexone was actually originally used for people with opioid addictions. And so it's a very, very, very small dose, and it's supposed to help with inflammation and bringing down the thyroid antibodies. And so I've been trying that for about a year and a half now. And so it really has helped. So there is that, but not every doctor is going to prescribe that. So, but the number one thing that is going to happen for most people with Hashimoto's is they're going to be put on thyroid medication and told to come back every 6 months. So what I want to teach people is that there's more to it than that. And I definitely am on thyroid medication, a very small dose, but I went 2 years just managing my symptoms completely. I reversed all of my symptoms with no thyroid medication at all. 100% changing my diet, changing my lifestyle. And how I changed my lifestyle is I went from teaching, 20, sometimes, it was a lot of classes. I stopped doing them all. Like I got help. I actually closed my studio, not because of Hashimoto's, but I closed the studio, and closing the studio and reducing my stress levels and spending more time like walking in nature. And I started meditating, and I started getting, 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. Like I really focused on the recovery, the healing of my body. That really made a major difference. And so I think that's why I was able to put it off for so long. However, those 5 years of symptoms probably did enough damage to my thyroid that all of a sudden it was like to the point where I was like, I needed the help of some thyroid medication.
Yeah.
But
wow. Well, that's great that you're able to reverse some of those symptoms and manage them really well within those 2 years.
Yeah.
When it comes to Hashimoto's, is there any direct effect for people when it comes to maybe cravings or insatiable hunger or overeating? Like, is there a direct link at all?
I want to say yes, because when you have, your thyroid is being attacked and it's not working as well, that's going to slow your metabolism, but it's also going to cause anxiety, can cause depression. And those things, as you know, can lead to emotional eating and cravings. So I would say more from an emotional standpoint, the cravings, maybe not as much from a physical. Although if you're having food intolerances and you're not eating well and your gut health is not right and you're not absorbing nutrients correctly, then you might be craving food that because you're just have a physical need for food. And a lot of people, this is also, I just thought of it, is people with Hashimoto's are more likely to become insulin resistant.
Wow.
And diabetic.
Wow.
So because of having a slower underactive thyroid. Yeah. So absolutely a direct link.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of information. A lot of, I feel like thyroid issues are coming up more and more for women. Every time I talk to someone, they're either hypo or hyper or trying to figure out what's going on with their thyroid, wanting to go get tested, wanting to go get their hormones tested. And I love that there's so much knowledge and talk and education coming out about it and empowering women to take more onus over their bodies and their journeys. But it can be really complex and take some time to figure out, right? Like it took you 5 years, but it also, like, from once you learned it took you a couple of years to get your symptoms under control.
Absolutely. And so, and I think that it's just important for people to understand, if you get this diagnosis, there's nothing wrong with you. It's like, it's just a part of like who you need to, who you are. And so it's just managing it. It's just like doing it, what you can, like, just do your very best, do the best you can every day. And there's not going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
There's going to be mess ups. I mean, here I am coaching other people and I go on vacation and cause a flare up, like, I mean, it's life. And it's like, so you can beat yourself up over it and be mad about it, or you can just take some action and, just understand it's a lifelong process. And I think, I'm still learning every day. I'm learning something new about myself and how it's affecting me and helping others. So I mean, it's just like any other condition. You just have to, work with it and do your best and keep educated.
Yeah. I think those are great takeaways. I think those are good takeaways for us to wrap up with.
Yeah.
So how can people find you? How can people work with you? How can people connect with you?
So I think the best place to find me now is probably on Instagram or Facebook. And it's just at Rae Anne Mullins. I do have a free Facebook group too for anybody that's interested. And it's more lifestyle, but it's, going more towards Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions. And that's called the Balanced Fit and Free Lifestyle Group. But I also have a podcast called the Balanced Fit and Free Lifestyle Podcast. Nice. So it's everywhere too. And on the podcast, I talk about everything, mostly, nutrition, how it relates to, lifestyle, but also, exercise and a lot of mindset and emotion work on there too, because I believe that that's a huge part of healing your Hashimoto's. So, and to work with me, really just send me a message, on Instagram, and, we can have a conversation and just see, if I'm a good fit or not, if we're a good fit for each other. So really just one-on-one right now is what I'm doing.
Great. We will actually link your Instagram and your podcast down below so people can find you really easily. But
Okay.
thank you so much for being on, Rae Anne. And this was super
Yeah.
informative for me. And I hope it will be
Good.
informative for others who are maybe trying to explore and learn more about their bodies or get their hashis under control. And thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Of course.